When someone suddenly drifts into your mind, not through a memory you intentionally summoned, but like a gentle wave brushing past, leaving a lingering echo, that is when the subconscious is speaking. You might be working, sitting on a bus, or quietly sipping your morning coffee, and then, without warning, their image appears so vividly that you can almost feel the atmosphere of their presence. You didn't choose to remember, yet your mind keeps placing them before you as if to remind you of something still unresolved. In that moment, a question arises, not only why them, but also why now? You wonder if somewhere at that very same moment, they might be thinking of you too. What seems like a simple question actually has roots deep in our emotions and our human need for connection. It touches a primal longing, the desire to be seen, to be remembered, to exist in someone else's inner world. But the truth is, this is not merely a fleeting emotional reaction. It is the result of intertwined threads of psychology, memory, and emotional energy woven together, stored and activated by the subconscious. The subconscious, that deep, unceasing recorder of every experience, never brings someone back into your thoughts by accident. It operates on meaning and emotional resonance, paying no attention to logic or timing. And when it keeps placing a person at the center of your mind, it means that somewhere inside you, a part of the story between you and them is still unfinished. This feeling is rarely loud or explosive, but it is persistent and deeply rooted. You might try to push it away, distract yourself, or rationalize it as nothing more than a passing thought. Yet, like the tide, it returns, sometimes forceful, sometimes just a ripple, but never entirely gone. What's striking is that this return is rarely about who they are now. What you remember might be the look in their eyes from years ago, an unfinished conversation, or even the way you felt standing next to them. It is that moment, not their present self, that your subconscious holds on to, because it carries a unique emotional value. On a deeper level, this reveals that the human mind does not merely store facts, it stores experiences bound to emotions. When someone has touched you at that depth, they don't just live in your memory, they become imprinted in your emotional mechanism. And every time they resurface, it's a sign that your subconscious is trying to revisit, process, or complete an emotional journey left unresolved. In that moment, you stand between two possibilities: to believe it is mere coincidence, a fleeting quirk of the mind, or to acknowledge that you are being invited to look deeper into something more important, something you might have overlooked in the rush of life. Because sometimes the reason someone keeps appearing in your mind is not for you to go back to them, but for you to return to yourself, to the story, the emotions, and the lessons, their presence once awakened. This is the opening moment of a journey, not only to answer the question, are they thinking of me, but also the deeper one, why does that matter so much to me? And sometimes the ultimate answer is not in knowing what's on their mind, but in recognizing what your own heart truly needs. The subconscious never randomly chooses a face to hold on to. Every image that lingers persistently in your mind carries a message, whether you realize it or not. When someone becomes a permanent resident in your stream of thoughts, it is proof that a part of the emotions or the story between you and them has yet to be closed. It doesn't care how many times you've tried to forget, nor about the distance, the years, or the current state of your relationship. The subconscious only cares about what is left unfinished. This deep realm of the mind stores not only memories, but also the feelings attached to them. It doesn't operate with the logic of the conscious mind. Instead, it speaks the language of symbols, meaning, and emotion. That person appears not because they matter in your present, but because they represent a missing puzzle piece you have yet to place. It could be words left unsaid, a truth not yet faced, or a feeling that has never been named. The subconscious is like a patient file keeper. It organizes every experience into different folders, but if there is one that remains incomplete, it will keep placing it on your desk. Each time their image appears, it is that file you have yet to address. And until you open it, read it, understand it, and close it, it will not go away. This doesn't necessarily mean you must go back to them. In reality, most of what the subconscious wants to resolve isn't about the person at all, but about the impact they left behind. Someone can walk into your life and activate emotional depths you had never touched before. They might awaken a sense of being deeply understood, or conversely, stir up the fear of abandonment. The subconscious will hold tightly to such moments until you understand why they matter to you so much. This phenomenon is also tied to the concept of a psychological echo. When an experience leaves a strong emotional imprint, it doesn't just exist as a static memory, it reverberates. And with each echo, it reignites the same emotional frequency as the first time. That person, therefore, becomes a living symbol for a part of your personal story still left unwritten. Sometimes, this persistence is not born from love or romance, but from the fact that they touched a hidden part of you, a part you have not yet understood, accepted, or completed. They may reflect a side of yourself you have never dared to face. And until that image is integrated, the subconscious will keep bringing them back, giving you a chance to finish the work. The subconscious is not bound by time. It doesn't care how long it has been or how many other people you've met. If an experience has not been fully decoded, it will remain like a lesson waiting to be learned. Each time they reappear in your mind, it is a reminder that a part of you is still waiting to be understood, healed, or closed. This unfinished business can be subtle. You might think you have forgotten, forgiven, or moved on. But if it is only your conscious mind saying so while the emotions inside remain suppressed, the subconscious will disagree. It will find ways to bring it back, quietly but persistently, until you truly face it. Instead of viewing the constant appearance of someone in your mind as an annoyance or a sign of weakness, see it as a missed call from your own inner world. That call is inviting you to come back, sit down, and listen to the story that has never been told in full. Because only when you have an honest conversation with that part of yourself will that guest finally leave and your mental space be truly freed. Some relationships don't end with a clear goodbye, but with a sudden silence, leaving behind countless unanswered questions. That is when emotional debt is born. Not a debt that can be measured in money or time, but a debt of words never spoken, truths never faced, and feelings never expressed. The subconscious stores these gaps like an unhealed scratch, and every time their image appears in your mind, it's a reminder that the debt still remains. Emotional debt doesn't only come from sweet moments cut short, but also from wounds left unhealed. When you've never had the chance to say, "This is how much I hurt, this is how much I loved, or this is what I needed," the mind will never consider the story complete. It will keep circling back, trying to reconstruct the unfinished scenes, as if searching for a more fitting ending. What makes emotional debt so deeply rooted is that it isn't just tied to the other person, it's tied to you at that specific point in time. You don't just miss them, you miss the version of yourself you were when you were with them, the version that once hoped, felt, and hurt. Sometimes the longing isn't for the person, but for the chance to return to who you were before the story took a different turn. The absence of closure leaves emotional gaps that the subconscious constantly tries to fill. You can imagine the mind as a perfectionist storyteller, unwilling to let a story end halfway. If a chapter remains open, it will keep that character in place, giving you the chance, even if only in thought, to write the rest of the ending. But the problem is, you can't always go back to continue the story. Sometimes the other person has gone too far, or the foundation of the story no longer exists. And in those cases, the ending has to be written inside you, not outside. The hardest part about emotional debt is that it can blur the line between missing the person and needing to close the story with yourself. You might think you want them back, but in truth, what you need is to close the door that has been left ajar for far too long. Until you do, their image will remain a symbol of what's unfinished. And each time they appear, the sense of loss and incompleteness will be revived. Emotional debt also explains why small fragments of memory, a sentence, a glance, a touch, can haunt you so powerfully. They are the leftover pieces of an incomplete picture. And like any brain searching for wholeness, you will try to fit them into a complete story. But in many cases, the only wholeness you can find is not in piecing the story back together with them, but in accepting that the picture will always have a missing corner and that this is okay. Healing emotional debt requires facing yourself more than facing the other person. It is the journey of realizing that you have the right to close the story even without receiving an explanation or an apology. You can give yourself the answers, the comfort, and the recognition you once waited for from them. When you do, their image in your mind will begin to change. They will no longer be the one who left the debt, but the one who taught me a priceless lesson. And when the lesson is complete, the debt will be erased, not because they paid it, but because you chose not to carry it anymore. Some connections don't just exist on the surface of emotions, they leave an imprint on the level of energy, something invisible yet more enduring than any memory. When two people meet at a time when both are open or going through a profound period of transformation, that interaction doesn't stop at words or actions. It creates an energetic imprint, like a unique frequency, and that frequency keeps resonating long after you and they have stepped out of each other's lives. The feeling that someone is still present in your mind sometimes doesn't come from conscious longing, but from the energetic resonance you once shared with them. It's what makes you suddenly feel as if they are near, even when there's no logical reason to think so. A scent, a melody, or even the afternoon light can be enough to stir that sensation, as if their presence is being replayed, not through memory, but through the energy field that once connected the two of you. When this resonance is strong enough, it transcends the limits of time and distance. You may have no contact, no meetings, and not a single tangible tie left between you, yet you still sense a faint knowing that they exist somewhere within the rhythm of your life. This isn't mystical magic, it's the natural way the mind and body work after deep emotional connection. The brain stores not just images and sounds, but also the energetic feeling you received from them. And when that feeling is triggered, it carries back the entire atmosphere of that connection. What's unique is that this energetic imprint doesn't distinguish between positive and negative emotions. A moment of intense love or a heated argument filled with hurt can leave an equally powerful frequency. If they once brought you peace, your subconscious will associate them with safety. If they once made you feel deeply alive, seen, and understood, that frequency will be tied to vitality and connection. Conversely, if they hurt you, that energy will also be deeply etched in, making each reminder a wave of emotion. This kind of spiritual resonance also shows that the other person doesn't only represent themselves, they represent a part of you. Perhaps they were a mirror, reflecting an aspect you longed for but hadn't unlocked. Perhaps they awakened a value, a belief, or a dream you had hidden away. Every time you think of them, you are, in truth, touching the part of yourself they once awakened. That's why their image lingers, not because you need them, but because you haven't yet found a way to keep that part of yourself alive without them. Understanding the energetic element helps you view their presence in your mind with less heaviness. Instead of thinking you are obsessed, you can see it as a reminder of an experience that shaped you in some way. Energy doesn't disappear, it transforms, and your task is to keep the essence of that experience while letting go of dependency on the person who brought it to you. When you realize that what they left behind is actually a part of yourself, you awakened through them, you'll no longer need them to feel whole. You'll learn to generate that frequency from within, nurturing it through your own experiences, thoughts, and choices. At that point, spiritual resonance will no longer be a tether keeping you in the past, but a launching pad propelling you forward, armed with an energy that is stronger, freer, and wholly your own. There are people who no longer exist in our lives, yet the feelings they once gave us remain intact, like a lingering aftertaste we unconsciously search for again and again. This is when we must face a difficult truth. Sometimes, what we hold on to is not the person themselves, but the feeling we had when we were with them. The brain is wired to remember and crave the repetition of experiences that produce intense emotions. If someone once brought us joy, the feeling of being deeply seen, or a sense of aliveness that reached into every fiber of our being, those moments become deeply encoded in our memory. They turn into reference points by which the mind compares all future experiences, and when it can't find anything similar, it will return to the source of that feeling, the person. The problem is, the mind often confuses the feeling with the person. It labels wanting this feeling as wanting them back. But in reality, people change, relationships transform, and what we recall is merely a version of them in a specific moment. Once the relationship has ended, finding that same feeling from them again becomes nearly impossible. What we truly long for does not reside in them. It resides in the emotional state they once helped us reach. This kind of emotional addiction is not so different from our attachment to a song, a scent, or a familiar habit. It is the craving to repeat an experience so deeply imprinted that its absence feels like emptiness. But if we keep equating the feeling with the person, we trap ourselves in a loop, searching for their image to trigger the emotion, only to be disappointed when reality no longer matches the memory. Separating the feeling from the person is a vital step toward liberation. It begins with asking, what exactly did they bring into my life? What was that state of being? Can I find or create it in another way without them? Once we answer these questions, we see that the feeling we crave, safety, excitement, validation, is not the exclusive gift of one person. We can nurture it from within ourselves or discover it in new experiences. This doesn't mean denying the role they played in awakening that emotion. On the contrary, acknowledgement and gratitude are essential, but gratitude is not dependency. Gratitude lets us cherish the lesson and the memory, while dependency keeps us returning to a place that no longer exists. And the more we cling to them as the sole source of that feeling, the more we limit our own ability to fully experience life. Emotional addiction is a sign that we have touched a state deeply meaningful to us. The challenge is learning to keep that state alive, making it part of who we are, rather than treating it as a gift that can only exist when someone else gives it to us. When we do this, we not only free ourselves from the grip of the past, but also open the door to new experiences, ones that may bring similar or even deeper emotions, because they are born from our own agency and growth. Letting go of the person but keeping the feeling is an act of self-liberation. Because once we realize that the emotion we cherish is something we can cultivate within ourselves, we are no longer bound to the image of a person, a moment, or a story. Memory stops being a chain and becomes a source of strength, reminding us that we once touched that sense of aliveness, and we can touch it again in another place, in another way, this time entirely of our own making. There are moments when you're thinking about someone and suddenly feel a strange coincidence. Maybe they're thinking about me too. This feeling is both warm and dangerous. Warm because it stirs the hope that the connection is still alive. Dangerous because it can easily become an imaginary bridge leading you back to a story that has already ended. Human beings have an innate desire for emotional symmetry. If we miss someone, we want to believe they miss us too. That belief touches our deepest instinct, the need to be acknowledged, mirrored, and to exist in someone else's mind. But between truth and illusion, the distance is sometimes razor thin. In reality, emotional synchronicity, when two people are triggered by the same memory or feeling at the same time, can happen. A song, an image, a scent can just as easily awaken the same memory in two people who once shared a bond. But that doesn't mean they still feel the same way about you, or that their care for you remains as it once was. It simply shows that a fragment of the story you shared still leaves a trace in their mind, just as it still lives in yours. The problem is, the human mind likes to fill in the blanks with comforting assumptions. When you don't know what they're thinking, you might unconsciously create a scenario where they still remember you, still feel the same, still keep a corner of their heart for you. This assumption acts like a temporary painkiller. It soothes the emptiness but prolongs the attachment. You're no longer in a real relationship with them, yet you maintain an imagined one in your mind where everything unfolds exactly as you wish. If you let this illusion guide you, you risk becoming trapped in a loop. The more you believe they're thinking about you, the harder it is to let go. Because when you think the connection still exists, you'll find reasons to keep it alive, even if only in your imagination. On the other hand, facing the reality that they may not think of you at all forces you to confront the emotional gap, a discomfort that's painful but necessary for growth. Reality can be harsh. Someone may have moved on with their life without carrying a memory of you, or perhaps that memory has faded to a faint shadow. This doesn't diminish the value of your experience, nor erase the impact you once had on them. It simply reminds you that each person has their own journey, and synchronicity doesn't always last forever. The truth is, the question, "Are they thinking about me?" often reflects your own inner need more than it reveals anything about them. You want to know not because you require factual proof, but because you hope the answer will bring comfort, a confirmation that you still matter. But your worth cannot depend on someone else's memory or emotions. It must be nurtured from within. Realizing this isn't easy, but it's a necessary step to detach yourself from illusion. Remember, someone not thinking about you doesn't mean you're worth any less. It simply means your role in their story has come to an end. And that's normal, just as you have let people who once mattered drift out of your own mind without any ill intent. When you dare to look reality in the eye, you reclaim ownership of your emotions. You no longer live in waiting or speculation. You'll see that what matters is not what they think of you, but what you think of yourself. When you're no longer bound by the need to be remembered, you're finally free to write the next chapter of your life, one that doesn't need to begin with their name. When the question, are they thinking about me, keeps surfacing, pause and ask yourself something far more important. Why does this matter to me so much? Often, what you're seeking isn't information about them, it's a confirmation of your own worth. We tend to measure our value through the eyes of others. When someone who once mattered is no longer in our life, the mind wants to believe they still remember, still care, still hold space for us. That belief acts like an external mirror reflecting the image we want to see of ourselves: memorable, valued, not forgotten. But the danger is when that mirror disappears, our sense of self can become unstable. Shifting the focus from them to yourself means learning to seek validation internally instead of depending on it externally. It's the movement from do I still matter to them to do I still matter to myself. When you are certain of your own worth, whether they remember you or not becomes secondary. This doesn't mean dismissing your feelings or pretending they never mattered. It means honoring that you shared something meaningful while choosing to continue nourishing yourself, regardless of whether that connection still exists. The truth is, many people hold on to the image of another person as an anchor to avoid feeling adrift. But that anchor can also be a chain. It keeps you tied to an old version of yourself, the version they once saw, loved, or respected. If you don't give those things to yourself, you'll remain dependent on their memory to feel valuable. This redirection begins with honest self-inquiry. How did they make me feel? Not to seek that feeling from them again, but to identify what you're missing and need to replenish from within. If they made you feel heard, ask whether you're listening to yourself enough. If they made you feel strong, find ways to cultivate that strength without anyone else's permission. Refocusing also means reframing the story. Instead of making them the center, see them as a special chapter in your journey of growth. They help shape you, but they're not the sole author of your story. The pen is still in your hand. The key is to recreate the positive emotions you once experienced, but this time through new choices and new experiences. When you do, you realize that feelings of happiness, safety, or confidence are not exclusive gifts from one person. They are inner resources you can activate anytime. Bringing the focus back to yourself is not selfishness. It is self-preservation. When you know your value doesn't shift according to someone else's thoughts or memories, you become truly free. And that freedom carries its own unique magnetism, the magnetism of someone who doesn't need to be remembered in order to feel worthy. When you live this way, the question, are they thinking about me, fades. Not because you've erased them, but because you no longer need that answer to feel whole. Instead, you'll be busy thinking about yourself, what you want to build, experience, and become. And in that moment, you'll see clearly the focus was never meant to be on them, but on the one place you have full power yourself. Liberation is not forgetting. Liberation is looking at the whole story, keeping what is worth cherishing, and releasing what keeps you stuck. It doesn't erase the memory, it redefines it, so it no longer has the power to dictate your present. As long as you see that person as the sole source of your feelings, your comfort, or your sense of meaning, you're still placing your freedom in their hands, even if they've been gone for a long time. Liberation begins when you realize that what they left behind has in fact become a part of you, and you can continue to nurture that part without their presence. Redefining meaning means changing the way you interpret their place in your life. They're no longer the one I lost, but the one who helped me see a part of myself. They're no longer the reason for your pain, but the catalyst for your healing. When the story is reframed this way, you're no longer the one left behind. You become the one who received the lesson and chose to move forward. The key is to allow yourself to see the value in what is past, even if it didn't end the way you wished. Every experience, sweet or bitter, carries the seed of growth. When you stop asking, why did they leave? And start asking, what have I learned since they left? You shift from the role of victim to the role of creator. Liberation doesn't arrive in a single moment, but through a series of small choices. Every time you choose to focus on the present, instead of immersing yourself in memory, you remove one link in the chain. Every time you find joy, peace, or inspiration from a new source, you loosen another tie. One day you realize you no longer need the answer to, are they thinking about me? Not because you've forgotten them, but because the question no longer defines your worth. Redefining meaning also means letting the memory exist as part of you, but not all of you. You can remember without longing to return. You can be grateful without needing to reconnect. You can love in silence without requiring love in return. In doing so, you step out of the loop of dependency and into the freedom of choice. Here, the memory of them is no longer a chain pulling you back, but a map showing where you've been and what you've become. It reminds you that you were brave enough to open your heart, deep enough to connect, and strong enough to stand again after loss. This is the true legacy of that connection, not their constant presence in your mind, but the strength you gained from the journey. When you reach this state, everything feels lighter. You don't need to erase or fight the memory, nor do you need to cling to it. You simply place it where it belongs as a completed chapter in a much larger story, and that story is still being written with you as the main character. Liberation and redefining meaning are not just the final steps of this chapter, they are the beginning of the next. A chapter where you walk forward with a heart no longer weighed down by the past and a mind open to every possibility ahead. Because true freedom doesn't come from erasing the past, but from turning it into the foundation for the present and the future you choose.